Hello, Endersword here, this time with a quick video on faction grinding. If you are a new G7 player, you're definitely going to need this, as you're going to have to get to 9 trillion of one faction just to build your first miner and eventually get up to 300 trillion. If you're in the 50s or 60s and trying to get your faction up quickly to that 500 billion or 15 billion lock, then the mirror universe is definitely going to be the way to go. And a lot of these techniques are generally going to work for you depending on your officer levels and things like that. So the first thing that I want to address, as it's the first thing you have to set up before you leave dock, is exos and how they work. A lot of people don't realize that you can actually stack the reputation exos. You can run multiple at once and they will all have a cumulative effect on what you're doing. So I'm running 100% Federation, 70% Federation, and 40% Federation in the Galaxy spot and the 2 multi-purpose spots. If you want to try and do all 3 at once, you of course can run 100, 100, 100 in the 3 different factions and do it that way, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. I'm trying to push up Federation first, so this is the way I'm going to go. And these do, like I said, compound on each other. So we'll take a look at how these numbers actually surprisingly compare to some of the other things that we're looking at. In dock, I've got the crew, or at least the best crew I have available to do this, but I think these are the officers that max out the highest in terms of reputation gain. We've got Felon over here, whose officer ability is potentially a bit misleading. When I brought this up to a couple of people, they mentioned, hey, he doesn't say that this should work. Increase in base positive reputation gain from Federation, Klingon, and Romulan hostiles by 400%. So that's when he's maxed out. A lot of people interpret that as, well, then you have to kill Klingon, Federation, and Romulan hostiles, and you would think that because that's what it says. But it turns out he just applies to this faction regardless of what you're actually killing. So even though the hostiles are not FKR hostiles, he still actually works in reality. The second officer, which has kind of a similar slant to it, is going to be the S&W Black Ops Chapel. Her I don't have leveled up much. As you get the Serene Squall unlocked, you get actually free shards of her as you level the ship up. So that's the main way to get her up. She's got a similar thing. She's going to max out at 450%, but I've currently got her tier 2 at 125%. If you don't have her yet, you probably want to be using 5 of 11 if she is above tier 3, or Enterprise Picard if you don't have 5 of 11 above tier 3. But she's the best we've got, so she's going to add 125%. The other officer here, which again, if you don't have a high enough 5, gives synergy to Enterprise Picard, is going to be Rachel Garrett. Increases base loot gain from non-armada hostiles by 200%. She is one that you can upgrade with those officer depot tokens, and I would actually recommend her as one of the first ones that you really go after, simply because of this loot gain, and she synergizes well with the E-Picard and E-Data, who you're going to use a lot. So getting that crew up is a really good both combat and general loot crew, so she's a good one to be getting up. Now, another thing that sometimes new players don't know is that loot gain includes reputation gain. So it doesn't explicitly say that, but it does, so this will increase our faction gain as well. Doctor down below caps out at 50% of hostile drops, so that one will help too. Beer, who you can upgrade in the, DTI store. Also another 100% at rank 5. And then we've got Freeman that is going to give us specifically faction gain by defeating hostiles by 50%. So basically all of these together are pretty good. I think this is the maximum crew you can get, particularly once I max her out. These two are just kind of here for combat. So B'Elanna giving hull breach as well as extra isolytic damage from having hull breach. And I just threw her on for a tiny bit of apex barrier You could make some other options here, and depending what ship you're using, you're going to have more slots, whatever. But generally, you want to fight things where you can run this sort of crew and still easily be able to kill the absolute maximum amount that you want out of it. So talking about numbers, I have most researches for faction gain. There's tons of them out there. There's also favors available in like the DTI store, and there's tons of things along the research path that you can get that are going to increase the gain on faction you can get. The only ones that I don't really have maxed out is the premium dust, where you can get an extra, say, 360% out of this if I was going to dump all my premium dust into this, but I want to finish some of this other stuff first before going into that, so I'm going to take the hit on it. So all told, added together, I've got 2,043.5% bonus on faction from my research combined, and those officers combined are 450%, 125%, 200%, gets me to 775 there. Below deck, we've got another 200%. We're at 975. So add that on top of all of it, and we're close to a 3,000% bonus on what you should get. And you can kind of test that. I turned the Exocomps on already, but you can kind of test these things out. The way that all works is strictly additive. So every number that says is just added to the additional one. If I was to level up the Black Ops Chapel from the 125 to 450, it's simply going to add that extra 325% to that, and it'll be at 3,325% or thereabouts. However, the part that does not strictly add to it is the Exocomps. The Exocomps multiply. They don't add to it. So if you take the 100% Exocomp and add it on top of your base, it's actually going to approximately multiply that by 2. It's not completely. There appear to be some things that don't get the multiplication. So when I actually multiply it, it's not quite double. And I think what it's leaving out are things that generically increase loot as opposed to increase faction. So it will double the faction gain things as opposed to just the loot gain ones. So it's not quite double, but when you stack those three on top of each other, you've basically got 100%, 70%, 40% on top of it, and that's going to result in basically more than double. So if I went in here with no faction boost or no exos at all, then what I would be expecting out of this is a kill of about 30 million faction per. What we're actually going to get is a little bit more than that, which we'll calculate in just a moment once we get our first kill. And it's quite clean in that the things that we're going to be testing this on are exactly 1 million. So we will just kind of take a peek. We've got, let's cut off the 805,000 and say that we're at 410 million. 404,883 faction, and we'll come back to that in a second after our first kill. I still hate these riff things. They just never work the first time that you use them, and I don't know when or if they will ever fix such a thing. So here we are against our first hostile. You can see it gives a clean 1 million per kill, is what it's supposed to do if you have no research, no upgrades, anything like that. And we're going to check in on what that in fact did. So our 410 million minus what we currently now have, 494,160,883. We are getting 83,756,000 per kill off these hostiles running this crew. The other two parts I didn't mention, I've got the Agony booth on here as the forbidden tech. That is also going to give you an additional 450% bonus to that. And I've got I always forget the name of the thing, so I'm just going to look it up. Here's the this thing, the Thought Maker. The Thought Maker also gives you an additional 20% on top of that. If you're a lower player that you may be using something like a Pilum or a Coronair, something in that 46 range, the ship loot bonus also does work as well. And if you're someone that has already leveled up a Dauntless a lot, I'm just at tier 2, but these apparently can get powerful enough to come into the level 65 or 68 space once they're at tier like 8, 9, or 10, and can do a pretty good job there. And probably eventually they'll be able to do the 70s as well. There's an innate ship bonus on that ship too, where it's going to increase the loot. So basically what we've ended up with is over an 8,300% boost to the faction that we get. So it's still going to be certainly a hell of a grind. Even at 83 million per kill, you're going to need to kill quite a bit. 1,000 of these would basically be 83 billion. 10,000 of these would get you to like, a portion of a trillion. So it's going to be a bit. You're still going to need to kill like over 100,000 to get to that 9 trillion lock. But if you're someone that is still working on that 500 billion lock, you can actually crazily do that in like a day. If you just kind of have a ship that is capable of getting here, which you probably should if you're kind of looking to push into that 70 range or the high 60s, you can probably kill fairly endlessly in here, and you can grind that out pretty quickly. I actually did the last faction that I had to get up was Klingon, and I went from like 32 billion to 500 billion in a couple days of just going in and out of the mirror and kind of grinding away. I'm just kind of lazily queuing things up. If you really, really want to be on top of it, you can kind of always be clicking the closest hostile to take out. And of course, if you do get your Dauntless up here and just turn on its ability, it will always go to the closest thing. I'm able to get to the point where with a single ship, I can kill about 140 of these in the half hour that you've got assigned for your little mirror trip visit. And then, of course, because the exos last for 1 hour, you always want to then quickly turn around and go right back. So always try and plan to do 2 runs at once so that you're not wasting your exos. Those used to feel very, very plentiful, but now that I look at how much faction gain we need, you're going to need a lot of them and probably will run out by the end and be down to a measly 30 million per kill. So I hope this is helpful. This is definitely going to be a lot better than trying to grind hostiles in some of the newer space, even in like 6-star space or the new 7-star. There's the plus minus to everything as well. So if you're trying to raise multiple factions at once, this is definitely the place to go. It looks like it's going to be really hard to do that in the 7-star economy. They really, really want you to pick one because there's a lot of drawbacks to doing your dailies and so on. It's going to be hard to keep the other faction high enough, but this is a way to get a bit of a heads up and a head start on what you're doing and hopefully help people get to whatever lock you're seeking to do. If anyone has found any other crew member or thing to add on, definitely comment below. And of course, always just look at what level your officers are for what's the most appropriate. And then you may have to make adjustments depending on whether you're dying or not. But if you can't quite do the 70s, try the 68s. Those are going to be pretty easily done by someone that's 60 plus. And if you're lower than that, just try a bit lower, but find the sweet spot where you're looking for the most amount of kills that you can get for the amount of faction that you can get, and then use that to maximize what you're trying to do. Thanks for watching.